hats because I don't like my haircut. I'm not planning to go full political on this channel anytime soon, but this article isn't vibing with me, and I feel it's worth breaking down why it's dumb. Presenting the headline, Supreme Court deals blow to Gen Z's culture of entitlement. For context, this article was written Friday, June 30th, 2023, in the wake of the Supreme Court denying Biden's student debt relief executive order, I think. I might be mistaken. Now, I'm not going to be talking about student debt relief in this video. I have thoughts, but I think we are missing the more important aspect of the article. I'm talking about the declaration, Gen Z is a culture of entitlement. That would be the first I've heard about it, and he is declaring this as a member of Gen Z. For context, I am also Gen Z, and we both write a good bit, so I'm thinking we are on more or less even ground for me to retort him. Skipping past his initial bit about the decision and his political leanings and blah blah blah, he then goes into his arguments. With the entire point of the program is that students owe something and want those who do not owe it to pay it for them. So first, that is a blanket generalization, and that's silly. While plenty of people, I am sure, think that way, I am comfortable saying I am pretty sure the vast majority of Gen Z, as debt takers, were aware of what they were getting into. I personally went out of my way to avoid it and have graduated without a loan. And when I graduated high school, in conversations with the people I graduated with, we discussed avoiding the debt because we didn't want to go into debt. And in this Forbes article, he uses as a reference, we have the declaration, and I quote, "This generation is one of the most debt-adverse generations yet." So I think that it's very safe to say we understand the deal with how debt works. We know we will have to pay back the debt. We understand what we're getting into. Now, the reason I press on understanding the debt so hard is because that is evidence we understand we don't just deserve higher education, we are paying for it. The same way I might pay for a home with a loan that I know I will be paying back. Additionally, supporting a program is not the same thing as believing we are entitled to the benefits. For example, I support repairing some of the more rural roads in my area instead of repaving the main road for the 5th time, but I live in town and am rarely personally affected by these roads. Unless we want to tend to the roads ourselves, we don't deserve, we haven't earned good roads, but we can support a policy that can put a better road in place. Proving this point is a poll reported on by USA Today. I'll have a link to it in the description, saying, quote, "Notably, however, about 3 in 4 people who support the student loan debt forgiveness plan don't have any student loan debt themselves." Now remember, polls tend to be unreliable, and this one only had, I think, around 1,000 participants, but that is a notable population who are not going to benefit from the results. They are not entitled to any sort of results that still support this policy. And to be clear, I have no problem with people making arguments for or against debt relief. That is why I read opinion articles. It can be very entertaining, or it can be very fun to tear them down. And it's an extension of being a human with an opinion to express your own and to read someone else's. But in this case, this man is wrapping it in a playground level lazy insult that he does not provide any of the criteria to back up. The failure to understand the debt as a general occurrence, from my judgment, seems to mostly be millennials, because there's the ones that weren't really aware of what they were getting into. He then acknowledges colleges need to be more cost efficient, which I agree with. If we cut the sums put into sports and other non-class programs, I bet tuition could be dropped by probably half. But that point doesn't contribute to claims about student debt or entitlement while taking up space in his nearly 300-word opinion piece. He then says many colleges and universities from which they want free education encourage this entitlement with their culture of hypersensitivity, his words not mine. Now, hypersensitivity is an interesting topic and could be discussed in great detail, but we aren't doing that here. We're talking about his alleging of Gen Z being entitled, and these institutions encouraging it is not the same thing as it being received internally. You remember participation trophies as like a national experiment? The people getting them weren't seeking them out. The elders just decided they thought this was a good idea. Just because millennials or older college professors are more sensitive or concerned with microaggressions and other matters that he brings up does not mean that Gen Z is the one caring about it. That disconnect could be discussed, but this is far from definitive evidence of Gen Z being entitled. And considering personal experience, I've met maybe 2 or 3 people who act like this, and they are far from representing a cultural phenomenon. He then declares Gen Z is notoriously fiscally irresponsible, and he cites this article, which I mentioned already, declares that Gen Z is generally speaking debt adverse. But further than that, it declares that on a survey about financial matters, we got 43% of financial questions correct, which doesn't sound good, does it? It sounds quite bad whenever you present it as 43%. However, if we spend one moment checking the scale of events, millennials got 48%, Gen X got 49%. And keeping in mind, Gen Z includes teenagers and has upward of a decade, 2 decades less financial experience, getting slightly below them, I think, is not a particular failure. A more accurate statement might be to say Americans are notoriously financially illiterate. But even then, this is still also declaring Gen Z is debt adverse, which I think is a pretty big financial improvement. And that is all the arguments he needed to declare all of Gen Z as a culture is generally speaking entitled. The article was just over 300 words, and that is less time than I spent discussing oil in fantasy. I understood student loans. I'm sure you, the watcher, did as well. And by talking down to people, instead of at an even level, you have harmed your own arguments.